This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Gridiron Heroics Football Show. I'm Max Dean. I am a disembodied voice right now. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean. And yeah, we are here to talk about the Week 16 playoff situation update. Okay, so unfortunately my cameras are not working. Neither of them. I don't understand why. I believe it's a StreamYard issue because they're working in other places. But we decided to go live anyway. And with me, I have Kyron Samuels, former All-AFL offensive lineman, former Division I offensive lineman from Jacksonville State. And I have Nick Merriam, resident draft scout and analyst. Kyron, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good, man. Excited to get into it.
Yeah, we've got some good stuff here. I mean, this is what the whole season is all about. These last couple of weeks where really it means everything. Nick, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited for the playoffs. I think it's a bit of a different time. Like it's different football, right? And it's exciting. So I'm excited to just see that first schedule of Wild Card Weekend and get into it. Really.
Yeah, I just want to see what matchups are coming down the pipeline, and of course, always want to thank Noah Ashley, our producer at No Ashtray Sports on Twitter. Couldn't do this without you. This feels weird, but it is kind of a return to just straight up podcasting where nobody can see my face and it's all just voice here. But I'll just have to use my voice to tell the story, right? All right, guys. Happy holidays to everybody. You know, we're coming a day after Christmas. Now, we have one game left in the Week 16 slate. That's going to be tonight. It does have playoff implications. I'm sorry. No, I don't think the Colts are going to pull this one out. Chargers are on bit of a hot streak right now. So, but you know what? I've said that before, and they've either done it or come very close. So only time will tell. But we are going to start in the AFC. And I think the place to start is with the top. So the Buffalo Bills, they won their game this past week. They are looking to lock up a first-round bye. They are currently 12-3, tied with the Kansas City Chiefs for first place. They have the tiebreaker over them. So if they win out, they guarantee themselves that first round bye. So let me see here. They currently have a 46% chance to get the first overall seed, and a 25% chance to have the second place seed, and a 30% chance to have the number 3 seed. I'm not sure exactly why it increases with the number 3 seed. I guess it's just because of the tiebreaker with the Chiefs. I would imagine that's it. So we have, let's see. This coming week, the Buffalo Bills are going to be playing, let me pull this up here, the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a big game. I suppose this is also what has to do with the 30% and the jump there, because if they did lose to the Bengals, then they could potentially not have the tiebreaker over them and drop down into third place. And then to close things out, they will be playing, I believe, the New England Patriots. So, guys, what do we think about the Bills' chances of locking up that first overall seed? We know they've already clinched the playoffs. We know they've already clinched the division. So, for them, it's really all about trying to get that first round bye.
I think, they have a good chance to win against the Bengals. I think it's a good matchup stylistically for them. It's just they can't, specifically with the quarterback. Josh Allen can't play the way he's played the last 2 or 3 weeks and expect to beat these teams. Like the Bengals and even the Patriots that play really, really good defense. They don't have the great offensive firepower, but multiple turnovers game, you can't really have those, especially going into the playoffs, because that's when it'll really come back and bite you. So I think the defense is playing its best football of the year so far. I mean, they gave up some big plays to the Dolphins, but everybody does. I mean, when you have those skill guys, and you have when the quarterback is on, he's on, and you're going to give up plays to the Dolphins. But I mean, they gave up 10 points to the Patriots, 12 points to the Jets, 13 points to the Bears. I mean, for the last month, they've been playing really good football. So as long as the defense is playing well and they protect the ball, they have a really good shot, not only to, get the first seed, but go a long way in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why they might have a better chance of being the 3 seed is if they lose this Bengals game, they're going to lose that tiebreaker and be behind them. So that would be it. This is the big game for them that probably decides if they end up being the 1 or 3 seed, just because I don't really think the Chiefs are going to lose a game going down the stretch here. And since he's been kind of rolling, I wouldn't expect them. I think they're going to win the division regardless of what happens in this game. But this is an interesting matchup from the perspective of the Bengals haven't lost at home this year. I don't believe they've been just dominant in home games, even against good opponents. Like they've played their best games at home. It's going to be difficult for Buffalo, I think, coming off of an emotional, primetime win at home in that kind of, explosive Buffalo environment where they really, they have benefited, I think, from that home crowd as well. To going into Cincinnati where things have gone so well for the Bengals. But if they're able to win this game, I think it's the type of win that prepares you really well for a playoff run, just because I don't know that they're going to have as difficult of a game in terms of atmosphere as this one that they play tonight or Monday night next week if they do win. But I think for me, it does come down to just quarterback play. I think what you're going to get from Burrow. It's going to be high floor. It's just how well does Allen play. I do think he looked better in the Miami game than he has in weeks. But it's been up and down and inconsistent. And I think that the fact that the run game did so well for them against the Bears this past week, I'm forgetting they played the Bears in between. So I'm talking about the Dolphins game as the last game. He wasn't as good against the Bears. But the fact that run game looked as good as it did and they have all these backs now, I think they need to continue to emphasize that because we've seen them use the backs more in the passing game as well, and it's been kind of a new element that they're still figuring out.
Yeah, well, we use the Dolphins game a little bit more as a marker than the Bears game. To be fair, I think when you're looking at the Bears, you're really looking at, what's there for them to build on for the future. But if you want to talk about how the Bills performed against a playoff-worthy team, you really do have to go back at least 2 weeks. So I think it's probably a more relevant point, a more relevant measuring stick. So, I think at this point, the chances are decent for the Bills, but I think my confidence is higher for the Chiefs because the Bengals game really is a toss-up, even though I like both of them. There's a consistency with the Chiefs, plus I think their overall matchups are probably a little bit less challenging. So on that note, let's switch right over to them. The Chiefs currently have a 45% chance for the number 1 overall seed. So they are right there behind the Bills. So even though they don't have the tiebreaker, if they win out, they have nearly as good of a chance as the Bills to take that. They have a 47% chance of taking the number 2 seed. So that really just is if the Bills win out, that's where they would be. A 9% chance to have the number 3 seed. I think, again, the expectation for most of us is that they do win out. They clinched their division quite a while ago. Their upcoming schedule is versus the Broncos and then at the Raiders. Again, you look at that, their divisional games, you never really know what's going to happen, but there's a confidence there, that Patrick Mahomes is probably not going to have a bad enough game that would really actually come to fruition. They do have to win out, and the Bills have to lose at least one game for that to happen. I'm not sure even how much there is to say there. This is a team where with Jalen Hurts out, they probably have the MVP playing quarterback for them. They have played extremely well late in the season every single year that it's been Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes together. So, it really comes down to whether the Bills drop one. Any differing feelings on that? I would be surprised, but I do want to give you the opportunity.
No, not really. But the only thing I'll say is that this is the only team that I don't think it matters where they're seated. I think every other team should be fighting hard to keep, like, the Bills should be fighting hard to keep their spot. They don't want to go on the road for the playoffs. The Chiefs are the only team where I just think it doesn't matter. Wherever they are, whoever they play, I'm going to favor them. They've been the most consistent, like we said. They have the quarterback. They have the matchups. I think it matters a lot less for the Chiefs to get the number 1 seed than it does for the Bills.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, what I will say is important is I do think these 3 teams that we're going to talk about first are kind of in their own tier right now in the AFC, and getting that 1 seed helps you avoid having to go through both of these opponents. So that's kind of the big benefit you're going to get from playing. The home field, like, quite honestly, like, is less important than not having to beat the Bills and Bengals in back-to-back weeks, or if you're the Bills, the Bengals and Chiefs, or the Bills and Chiefs, you're the Bengals. So because the Bengals do have an outside shot still, I believe, to get them 1 seed. Not that that's going to happen. It would require probably the Chiefs slipping up in Las Vegas in Week 18, which I wouldn't throw out the window, but it seems unlikely at this point, considering where the Raiders' inconsistencies have been. Kansas City just needs to continue to play well. As long as they don't stumble on these last 2, I feel pretty confident. It doesn't matter who they need to go through; they should feel good about their chances. But obviously, it would increase if they were able to win and get the Bills to drop a game.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I agree with that. They are the most consistent team on the road as well. I think the Bills' home stadium is a big benefit for the Bills. I think the Chiefs can win anywhere. So the first round bye, that probably helps any team just from, a health standpoint. It's just 1 less game you have to play, a little bit extra rest, 1 less opportunity to lose. So, from that perspective, I think that they would want the number 1 seed. But from a confidence level playing on the road, in which you would lock up basically home field advantage with the first round bye, the Chiefs, I would be less worried about that too. Cincinnati Bengals, they're coming off a last-minute win over the New England Patriots. A late fumble by Ramondre Stevenson gave them the opportunity to seal the game. They have not clinched the division yet. They are 1 game up on the Baltimore Ravens. They do have to face them in Week 18. They have to play the Bills this coming week on Monday Night Football, which we just talked about. At 11-4, even if they drop a game to the Bills, and if the Ravens were to win their upcoming game against the Steelers, which I would say is pretty reasonable, they would still have the tiebreaker over them and would need to. That's a question, though, because I need to double check. Noah, can you got it right there. Week 18 would decide the winner of the AFC North. Okay, so basically the Bengals can drop the next game, but they have to win in Week 18. Because, but then there's the question is, what if the Bengals also win this week and the Ravens lose this week?
That's the only way this can be clinched, is if the Ravens lose and Bengals win, the Bengals would clinch the division.
That's true. Okay.
2 games up.
Yep.
Otherwise,
All right.
it will be decided Week 18.
Gotcha, because it's just too close otherwise. Okay. So, I mean, what is the confidence level with the Bills and Ravens? I mean, those are 2 pretty challenging games. I don't know what the status is with Lamar Jackson. I can double check that quick to see if there's any update. Kyron, I mean, how do you feel about the Bengals? I'm not sure. At this point, Joe Burrow's playing very, very well. They started hot, didn't close out the game as they would have liked, but they were able to still come away with a victory.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about them yet. I know that I have a ton more respect for them as a team than I did about 8-9 games in, where they were 500 and weren't playing very well. I think that the defense is just playing incredible. So I think that's like the most encouraging thing about the Bengals right now. I know Joe Burrow's been playing well. The offense has been doing well, but he actually has 5 turnovers in the last 3 games. I mean, he's another guy akin to Josh Allen, where they're like we talked about that their floors are so high. But if we're talking about playoff games and winning in January when it matters, I think both of those guys have to cut down on the turnovers. because they're going to play well. Like in the big moments, I have no doubts that those guys are going to. If there's a time for a game-winning drive, I mean, if you have Joe Burrow or Josh Allen with the ball, you feel really good about it, right? But you can't give teams extra possessions in the playoffs and in these tough games like this when you're playing for seeding. So turnovers is something to watch for. But when the defense is playing this well, I mean, the last 4 games, I mean, they gave up 16 to the Titans, held the Chiefs to 24, which is actually pretty good. Held the Browns to 10, the Bucks to 23, and they scored a touchdown really late in that game where it didn't really matter. And then they gave up 18 to the Patriots, where the only reason the Patriots were in that game is because of those interceptions that I talk about. They were up 22-3. So as long as they're taking care of the ball and the defense is playing as good as they are, they have a good chance to beat the Bills, a good chance to beat the Ravens. And, they're a tough team to play in the playoffs because the defense is rolling. And like we said, the floor is so high with Joe Burrow. You don't really have to wonder what they're going to look like production-wise. They're going to give you 20-plus points a game. As long as you don't have a terrible day in office, you're going to probably be okay. So I like the Bengals. I don't know if I would pick them to beat the Bills or the Chiefs when it matters in the playoffs, but they're very, very respectable. And on their best day, they can beat anybody.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, they're going to believe they have a chance, and they should going forwards. But and you look at these last 2 games, I think as a Bengals fan, and they're both winnable, both losable. I would be happy if I find a way to win either of these games. If you win one of these last 2, you're going to feel good about your chances in the playoffs. If you win both, you're going to feel great. Just because this is a tough finishing stretch. They've got as tough of the last 2 games as any team in the NFL. The fact that they're both at home is great and can help you build some momentum. But still, like, these are both good teams that are going to be playing in the playoffs and present good defenses with explosive offensive potential because of their quarterbacks. So it's a good test for them early on. They'll get them in, ready for that playoff type football. They will be facing a lot of teams in the AFC that are similar. All these teams have pretty good quarterbacks. But I think for them, the Ravens game is going to be more important just because home playoff game in any type, they have to be hopeful for just because of how they've played at home. Even if you're not the number 1 or number 2 seed, just that opening wild card game at home is going to be a big deal for them just because I would feel at that point pretty confident that they're at least getting to the divisional round. And in that case, anything can happen. So, I hope I wouldn't be this is obviously not like a look forward to the Ravens game. I don't even worry about the Bills, but I would hope that they're, thinking about this Bills game still as much just because the division could very well come down to this Ravens game. And from their perspective, that could be more important, at least in terms of just not having to go on the road week 1 in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with you that these 3 teams are really atop the conference and should be kind of viewed in their own tier. And the fact that they do have to play both or do get to play both of their final 2 games at home does make a difference. I mean, I think as much as the Ravens game is important for them, I think you look at the Bills and you try and win that game because if you do, there's a chance that the Ravens, they fall to the Steelers. It's certainly possible. I know that they just beat them relatively recently with Tyler Huntley in, but I really do think that it's possible that the Steelers could knock them off. I don't think the Ravens are a super strong team without Lamar Jackson. So if you focus on the Bills, that might take care of itself with the Ravens. And if you do beat the Bills, then you have a better opportunity for more home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So I think that's just something for them to keep in consideration. The Jacksonville Jaguars, as of this week, have overtaken the Tennessee Titans for first place in the AFC South. They beat them a couple of weeks ago. They've beaten the Jets, the Cowboys, and the Titans in 3 consecutive weeks. That win over the Titans gave them the tiebreaker. So basically, no matter what happens, well, not no matter what happens, because if they win versus the Texans and the Titans lose versus the Cowboys, week 18 might not mean anything because they'll have a 2-game lead.
Just 1 game.
Yeah, I thought I said, they're both 7-8.
Yeah.
And I thought I saw earlier today that no matter what happens this week, actually, that the AFC South will be decided on week 18, which is like that's like the best case scenario for fans and for us as viewers because it's basically it's a playoff game, so it's basically a play-in game. So I'm really excited for that one. It's going to be an interesting matchup because you can't go off of previous games, right? Like they played 3 weeks ago. Jags looked really good against them. But man, the way Derrick Henry's playing right now, it's hard for me to, especially in a playing game and that type of situation. I would have so much respect for Doug Peterson as the head coach. We've seen him get it done and go win a Super Bowl before. We know what his offense looked like when they're rolling. Uh, God, it's just so it's going to be tough for me to pick against, Vrabel and that defense, though that front, and then that offensive line, and Derrick Henry. But you got to have a quarterback to win. It's just it's a very interesting matchup for me. I have no idea who I want to pick in that game, but I think the Jags beat the Texans. The Texans don't have a ton to play for, although they just played a pretty good game against the Titans this past week, which was kind of silly. They may have given up the first pick to the to the Bears, depending on how these next couple games play out. But I don't think that's really one you worry about as a Jags fan. I think they win that game, but this last one, I don't know. It's very, very tough for me to. It'll be very hard for me to pick against that run game and that defensive front for the Titans for just one game. But regardless of how the rest of the season plays out, I just want to say that the Jaguars fan base should be ecstatic. Like where they are right now, as opposed to where they were last year and the year before that. They're in a really, really good spot, and the future looks really, really bright for them, especially when you consider Calvin Ridley's coming back next year. You'll hopefully get Cam Robinson back healthy next year. Or, I mean, I've heard talks that they may try to move on from Cam and, get another franchise left tackle in there. It depends on, how much you value him as a player. But regardless, him coming back or you moving him for assets helps the team out tremendously. So they're in a really good spot. The Jags should be really excited for the future.
Yeah, I mean, you have your quarterback and you feel great. I mean, Lawrence has been playing like a top 8 quarterback over the past, month and a half. He's been great. Because of that, I kind of feel better about the Jags just going forwards in Tennessee and I think we're going to see that this week when the Titans go against Dallas. It's just, I don't know that they can keep up with Malik Willis at quarterback. I like Malik Willis. I don't think he's ready, and I think it's unfortunate they have to turn to him now. I think he's always been a guy that needed, a year or two to develop. And they just don't have, they have the ability to grind out games, obviously, and we've seen that from them at times. But I just think the moment a team starts scoring on you, you have problems. Whereas Jacksonville, I mean, they just won the shootout with Dallas, who, I know it wasn't against Jalen Hurts, but we just saw Dallas go and beat Philly in a similar game. So they clearly have shown potential to be able to battle these top-end offenses and play high-level football. They're not a pushover, I think, if they get into the postseason because of that. Obviously, the lack of talent compared to some of these other teams may create shortcomings at some point, but at least for right now, they're playing football about as well as you could expect from them. Like, this is their high end. They're peaking at the right time. And I think they're just going to keep rolling. Now, it's interesting. We just talked about as the show started that, sometimes these games are extremely difficult to predict. And I thought, a little bit different because this team doesn't have an offense to speak for, but Washington had a home game against the Giants where they were trending all in the right direction. The Giants looked like they were going the other way, and then they laid an egg at home in an important primetime game. And there's a chance that this is going to be the biggest, home game for Jacksonville in years, as it was for Washington. If they, just lay one egg, they could be out of this whole picture. So that's kind of the fine line that they're walking on right now. And hopefully, for the sake of Trevor Lawrence, like he just continues to play as well as he has and doesn't have any letdowns, because that's just keeping them afloat right now.
Yeah, it's funny. Like they're in the same spot now that the Colts were in last year when the Colts went to Jacksonville and laid an egg. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, like you said, because you just never know in this league week by week.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the way that the NFL tie-breaking procedures are for two teams battling out for the division, it's best head-to-head record, obviously, between the two, and then best one-loss tied percentage within the division. And so even if the Jaguars win against the Texans, they would still have to win against the Titans, because the Titans would have an equal win-loss tie percentage within the division if they close out week 18 with a victory. And then it would come down to best one-loss tied percentage in common games. And I believe the Titans own that, because the Jaguars, let's see here, they have a slightly better in-conference record. So that's what I mean. It comes all the way down to win-loss tie percentage in common games. So it really, truly does come down to week 18, which is pretty wild. All right. I mean, I feel better about them just because of the quarterback situation right now. But like you said, Kyron, I'm never going to count out Mike Vrabel's defense against anybody. The Baltimore Ravens, we talked about them briefly. They are second place in the AFC North. They are the fifth seed, so they're the first wild card seed. They've got to play the Steelers. Then they've got to go to the Bengals. At 10-5, they have already clinched a playoff spot, but that could be as high as winning the division over the Bengals. But also, I believe if the Chargers win tonight and the Ravens lose out, they could end up potentially being the sixth seed as well. Do any of you know off the top of your head if they would have the tiebreaker over the Chargers if they both leave the season with 10 wins?
Not sure at all.
Not sure how much it really matters, but
We're just getting into it. Like, I feel really, really, really good about the Baltimore Ravens right now. Like, I mean, so the last 6 games, they've given up 3 points. They had the fiasco against the Jags where they melted down like the last 2 drives and just gave up, 17 points in the last 2 drives or last 2 quarters, I believe. But other than that, then they gave up 9, 14, 3, and 9. I mean, they're playing the best defense in the National Football League right now. And I know everybody had a lot to say about the Roquan Smith trade, but since they've traded for that guy, they've been the best defense in the league. They've always been good, but they're getting their pass rushers back and healthy. I think with them and the Chiefs, it's kind of funny. They're probably 2 of the most healthy teams trending in the right direction. The Bills are dealing with a lot of injuries. The Bengals are dealing with a lot of injuries. They're really banged up front. Lyle Collins is out for the year. It's just the way you go about it in the playoffs, in my opinion, has always been you trust defensive lines and you trust offensive lines. I know Tyler Linderbaum is kind of holding them together right now with Stanley out, but I'm not going to ignore how efficient they've been in the run game as well. I really, really, really like the Baltimore Ravens. And if they get Lamar Jackson back, I wouldn't play him the rest of the regular season. You've already clinched the playoff spot. The job's done, in my opinion. You're not going to get a home. You're not going to get a first round bye. You're not going to get up high enough to get a first round bye. I think that they could win the division, but I think the Bengals win out. I don't really think that this. But then, like you said, it's hard to win every week. But my overall point is the cake's baked, man. You're in the playoffs. That's all the goal should be. Keep Lamar Jackson healthy for when it matters, and trust on that defense. And I think they'll be fine, man. I think they can beat the Steelers, and I think they can beat the Bengals for sure. But I don't even think this really matters. This is one of those teams where just getting in is the goal. And Lamar Jackson back, I don't want to jump out the window and say they'll upset a couple teams, but you better believe they'll be scared whoever's playing them first round.
Yeah, I think sitting Lamar this week again, if he's still not 100%, is absolutely the right move. I would think about still playing him against Cincy because if you're playing for that division, because I do think they're also a team that can benefit from home playoff game, and they've had a good match. They've been a good matchup for the Bengals really this entire time. I mean, they're just a different type of team for that defense to go against. The Bengals like to kind of lead with their pass rush, and it's just the Ravens don't really give you that opportunity, like to get leads on you early and then just run the ball out. So they have as good a chance to win that game with Lamar as anyone would. So in Cincinnati, so I would play for that. But yeah, their defense is really like rounded into form this year, and they've really struggled for like a year and a half, almost like figuring it out despite having all these great players. Another guy that I just for the life of me, like I guess it's because he's safety, like just does not get enough credit for like where they are. Is Kyle Hamilton? He has played really well sparingly. Like he's not like their starter, but he has been a slot guy, box guy. He's played like effectively some linebacker for them, and he's also actually played a good amount of deep half safety, and has just had this versatility grow throughout the year. Shows his ability in coverage. Really has been able to play in man and zone. Different roles from different spots. I really wasn't expecting him to be as useful as that type of coverage tool early on in his career, and I really liked him. I was a top 5 player on the draft this year. Falls to where he did because of all these concerns about speed and whatever. It clearly hasn't mattered, but I think because of the position he plays, he doesn't get enough credit. But he is been a big part of their ability to kind of tie things together on the back half and allow those healthier pass rushers now to get home, as they really have they're about as deep as anybody up front in terms of pass rushers. They have added so many guys. It's going to be a tool for them in the playoffs, and it's, I think, something that's also not being discussed enough about, because that's how we see teams like pull off upsets in the playoffs, like consistently.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, they have all these pass rushers and we didn't think about this, and then they just go at you in waves and they continue to sub, and the Ravens really go like 6 deep at edge.
It's hilarious because it's like the top 4 guys are like 33, 34 plus, like they're old, and they're just still really good. But then you got the young, like Ajabo's back. What's the kid? Owe. Like they have a lot of, like you said, they have so much depth. But it's just funny every time I think about how old those guys are up front and how dominant they are still. But I love, like I said earlier, I love them defensively. Like, I know a lot of people had a lot to say about that Roquan Smith trade, and like, oh, you don't trade for an off-ball linebacker. Like, who talked like that? It's football, man. Like, it's playoff football. With those guys up front, and then with Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith running around, man, they're a force to be reckoned with. I'm excited to watch them play in the playoffs.
Well, I think, linebacker conversation is for another day. But who would you rather have your young pass rushers learning from than Jason Pierre-Paul and Justin Houston and Calais Campbell? I mean,
Right.
A guy who's played every position on the line, basically. Like, what a tremendous group of veterans for those young guys to glean from. But so I did just want to bring this up. If it came to it, the Chargers would probably end up with the tiebreaker over the Ravens because of conference win-loss record. And that matters to me because if you're the Ravens right now and you don't squeak out a win over the Bengals, or you don't end up taking that division, right now in the 5 seed, that means a matchup with the Jaguars as your first round playoff spot. And we're talking positively about the Jaguars, but like you said, it's really more about the future. Like, you've got the quarterback, you've got a play caller, you've got some key pieces. But I would feel much better about going into Jacksonville in the first round of the playoffs versus the Bengals, Bills, or Chiefs, or whoever's in that 3rd seed. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then moving on to the Chargers. Chargers are at 8-6. They still have to play tonight, so they are one of the only teams that we're going to talk about that has 3 games left. In fact, they might be the only one, because I think the Colts are basically out of contention at this point. Yeah, they're no playoffs. So at Colts versus Rams, at Broncos, 2 of those are conference games, which mean more in this situation. The playoffs are not locked up for them, but they do have a pretty good chance to make it, as they have the tiebreaker over the Dolphins, who are probably their biggest competition for the spot. I'm feeling pretty good about those matchups at Colts versus Rams, at Broncos, but Rams could play spoiler. Colts could play spoiler. They're playing hard. They just have to play a full game. The Broncos have a great defense. I mean, a little injury here or there, even if it's not to Justin Herbert, could make a difference. So, I mean, they're in a good spot. They do control their own destiny for the playoffs, but it's certainly possible that, that something could happen. How confident are we in the Chargers right now to lock up a playoff spot?
I mean, listen, you know how I feel about Staley and company. So it's hard for me to be confident at all. As much as I love and respect and appreciate how great Justin Herbert has been, and he's had his turnover issues too. But it's just I love Justin Herbert. As much as I love Justin Herbert, as much as I don't trust that staff, and as much as I don't trust them defensively to get the job done when it really matters, it's very tough for me to. I think tonight they'll win, but with the way the Rams are playing on offense, and McVay has nothing to play for other than being the spoiler right now. They don't have any picks, so there's no reason for them to tank. Baker's there now. Maybe they found their backup for Matt Stafford next year, because they're going to run it back with Stafford another year. But the way Baker's playing, you want to get the most out of him. I can see that being a spoiler game. And then the Broncos defense shows up. I mean, they don't have a ton to play for it either, but we know how good their defense is. I just don't have a lot of faith in the coaching staff. I think a lot of times when it comes down to it, the trenches and the coaching staff gets the job done in the playoffs. But in my head, these are all playoff games for these teams. So I don't have a lot of faith in them. I have a ton of faith in Justin Herbert, and we'll see if Justin Herbert is good enough to overcome the ineptitude around him, basically. So that's my take on it. I have zero idea how they play out these last 3 games, but I believe in Justin Herbert. I think he's good enough to get the job done. I think he can overcome a lot of it. I just don't know how much.
I think they'll clinch next week. I don't think the Colts are doing much tonight. I think they win tonight. I think the Rams are playing better football, but that Broncos team is just a disaster. And I think honestly, the Rams putting up 51 yesterday is more about Denver than it is about where the Rams are right now. Especially considering I wouldn't be shocked if the Rams, start sitting more guys just because they're not going to want to injure players when they don't really need to be playing for anything. And that's always been kind of a McVayism. I wouldn't be shocked by that. This is really all in front of them, and you have to think like probably in the back of their heads a little bit. Herbert there's always been this kind of knock against his record as a quarterback. If he wins tonight, he'll finally, I believe, have a winning record for the first time, which has just been something he's been chasing his whole career. I have concerns about the staff as well. I think the schedule is too easy. I think they're playing some of their better ball at the right time, and just things are lining up for them. I'm not too concerned about their ability to make the playoffs at this point.
Once we get to the playoffs, it might be a little bit of a different story just because they're a lot more banged up than some of these other teams. I mean, right now, even the Jaguars are healthier than them. The Bengals, Chiefs, and Bills are certainly all healthier than them. They've got some key guys back, the receivers, but defensively and on the offensive line, I think those losses are still going to be major impact for them down the stretch. But making the playoffs would be a really, really, really big deal for that whole staff, the front office, the coaching staff, and everybody. So I think, no matter how far they go, that's kind of got to happen to not be a huge disappointment. But I tend to agree with you. I'm pretty sure they're getting in. So this takes us to a couple of teams here, actually 3 teams specifically, all in the AFC East. We'll start with the Dolphins because they are currently the team that are in the playoff spot, number 7 seed. They're 8-7. They've lost a few games in a row, 4 consecutively, actually. They've looked pretty good versus the Bills, pretty good in the first half versus the Packers, not so good against the 49ers and Chargers. I mean, you would hope that they can finish strong against the Pats and the Jets, but this is hardly locked up for them at this point. The Dolphins have, I kind of want to throw this just straight to you, Kyron, because I know you have probably more deep thoughts on this than necessarily either of us do. But, they don't have the tiebreaker over the Jets. Even if they did, they would still need to beat them in week 18. Even so, they have to win versus the Patriots this week and hope that the Jets lose versus the Seahawks to feel comfortable about that game. But, it could really come down to the wire for them. In fact, that might end up being one of the best games of week 18 as it stands. But how do you feel about the Dolphins and the way that they've closed out the last month worth of games?
So I don't really feel great about it, and I haven't felt great about it since the Lions game, and this is even when they were winning. I mean, it's really hard for me to sit here and because I have to hold the quarterback accountable for his mistakes. So it's like he played a really, really great first half, a really great 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter was just terrible. You can't have 3 turnovers. You can't play that kind of football. And it's almost perplexing. It's like the first one is the most concerning to me. Like the first one, the ball just sailed on him. You have to be able to make those throws. It's a difficult throw. I mean, he's bracketed by 4 guys, but he's open enough, and you've made that throw plenty of times to where you should be able to make that throw. The second one was a miscommunication on the route with Mostert. And to me, that's kind of like, while I also have to hold the quarterback accountable, also on the coaching, it's like, why are we throwing the ball so much on first down in the middle of the field? I think the inability to lean on the run game is a huge problem for this team. It's not like they're just inept running the ball. I mean, most of the average 5 yards a carry. Wilson averaged 4.8 yards a carry yesterday. They've been good enough running the ball to where you have to be more respectable with it. They're bottom 5 in the NFL in rushing right now. And it just the balance of the team is off, just completely. And this is on defense as well. Third down defense for that team, while it was better yesterday, they have a terrible, job getting off the field. I just don't feel very confident about them. And it was like the level that the quarterback has to play at for the team to be great. Well, not team to be great, but the team to win games is pretty like. I don't think it's sustainable. I think that's what we're seeing. It's a return to the mean. Like, he's a good quarterback. There's no doubt about that. Is he good enough to overcome the obstacles? I don't know if he's that good, but I don't know how many quarterbacks are. I think you look at what Tom Brady's doing, and we'll get to them later. But Tom Brady's good enough for them to stay in games and then win games late. I don't think that there's many other quarterbacks. I mean, we can go with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, but I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about that. I just don't think the team plays complementary football at all. I think the defense has just as many problems as the offense. I think the coaching staff isn't very in sync right now. They haven't made any adjustments for the last month of the season. And I just don't see a bright spot here. I think they beat the Patriots because they beat the Patriots 5 times in a row. And then the Jets are the Jets. I mean, while I really do appreciate the Jets defensively,
I think
17 points, I mean, that should be enough to beat a team like the Jets. But who knows? That's hard to score 17 points against those guys. It's very tough. I don't really like the position that the Dolphins are in at all.
This week was really the first time that I think we saw like a Tua letdown. And I'm not going to get, and I know that they've had some like rough games offensively in the past, but I think that's more about just defensively, other teams kind of figuring out some good game plans. And I think they have genuinely adjusted to an extent that allows them to operate the way they have. But we're seeing other issues with this team where it is like, yes, they're not able to run the ball as consistently, maybe because they don't trust their offensive line and or the defense is just not, been able to really win a game on its own or win kind of complementing an offensive game that isn't as high end as some of the other games we've seen from them. And I think the other thing that's just tough is they've had a really brutal schedule down the stretch here, and they've played some like really like decent football teams. They catch Green Bay at probably like the worst time. Like this is when the Packers are kind of finally having some optimism in terms of where their season could be going. And honestly, like they had control of that game and it just kind of fell away at the very end. And it sucks because I look at this team and they're 8-7, and I really don't feel like they should be 8-7 and like trying to get their way to the playoffs at the end here. They should be, a 9 or 10 win team that feels comfortable about their playoff spot. But it will come down to these last 2 weeks. I think the Patriots have kind of been, running off of some like freaky turnover plays on defense. I don't think that they shouldn't lose to that game, but obviously it will come down to the Jets. And, what does Mike White look like going in that game? What do the Jets do in Seattle? I'm concerned about that game. Well, we'll talk about the Jets, but ultimately, like, I think if the Dolphins play the way they did in the last 2 weeks, in these last 2 games, they should be in the postseason, even if it's not their best football. What concerns me is that I thought this was a team that like I was thinking, oh man, if they go into Kansas City, like they're a very different type of team that could, potentially shock somebody. That type of team that we saw in the first couple months hasn't really existed recently.
Well, I think the Dolphins, I worry about the defense against the Patriots because the Patriots can run the ball well and they can operate efficiently. So if you don't put the Patriots in a situation where they have to throw the ball a lot, like they can be a little bit scary. But if you do get points early on them, if you can formulate yourselves a comfortable lead, then you change the way that the Patriots have to play, a way that they're not really well built to play. So I don't know. I'm not really confident in the Patriots. For the Dolphins, again, if they beat the Patriots this coming week and then the Jets also lose, that's it for them. They're in. They've clinched that because they'll have a 2-game lead over the Patriots, a 2-game lead over the Jets. They have the tiebreaker over the Titans and any of those other teams that have like a less than 1% chance to get in. So they're pretty much good to go. But if the Jets win or if they lose to the Patriots, then they'll be holding on by the seat of their pants. I think the Patriots, they've got to play the Dolphins, then they've got to play the Bills.
Tough sledding for them.
Tough sledding for them. It is. I don't really see the way that they win versus either one of those. For them to win both games is pretty unlikely, even if they were to squeak out one. So we'll see. But I don't think the Bills are going to be resting guys because they're still going to be gunning for that number 1 seed because they're going to be, in lockstep with the Chiefs. So like there's no situation where they are, going to be hand gifted anything. So I'm not sure really how much to talk about with the Patriots. We know what they've got to do. I think our confidence in them is pretty limited just based on what they can do on offense. I mean, I'll give you guys both a chance to comment on it, but I think that, for the sake of brevity, we can probably just hit that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about the Patriots as I do about the Jets. I think for both teams, it's really, really solid defensive units. I think the Patriots have a little bit more continuity on offense. They can run the ball, like you said. They can just lean on the run game if they have to. I mean, it was last year where we saw them go into Buffalo and win a ball game where they only threw the ball 3 times. I mean, they still have the capacity to maybe pull off something like that. But yeah, they're really, really good defensively. They're good up front, and I just don't. Matt Patricia's just. I don't want to get too much into it, like you said, but really good, solid defenses, good run games. I just don't really see those offenses producing enough to get them over the hump.
The right moves could put them in contention next year, but
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're a team that's kind of riding off coaching a little bit in terms of the defensive side of the ball. Just like they don't create explosive plays on offense. They need to have these 12-play 80-yard drives. It's quite frankly, it's a little unsustainable. Like they're going to try and score 20 points every game, and then they're going to hope that they get the explosive plays they're looking for on defense. And to be fair, like the other team that's kind of like this is the Giants, and both these teams run defensive structures where schematically, like they are probably more likely to create these explosive plays on defense just because they're blitzing all the time and Patriots just playing a bunch of man coverage. But at some point you run into a good team and you play a game where you don't, force a defensive touchdown or 3 turnovers. And then what do you do? And I unless like Tua just completely flops in this game upcoming, I don't really see that happening. I think Mike McDaniel, just knowing what the Patriots are going to do, they don't really, go away from like what they like to do, which is that kind of cover 0, cover 1, just man coverage blitz. They're going to have a plan for it. They're going to try and protect the football. And then it's just about, does Mac Jones show up the way he did against Minnesota? Because it's really the only time we've seen him play, good to great football at all this year. And with the weapons they have, the inconsistency, they have a good O-line, but it just hasn't been the same as it was last year.
Yeah.
I don't really see this team's like upside in terms of being able to win against playoff teams going down the stretch here.
I doubt it. So the Jets are interesting to me because really does depend on Mike White. We've seen Mike White play very, very well, honestly. I think his play in the 3 games where he was in was genuinely, certainly top 20 quarterback level. I think you could argue even higher. His limitations come with movement. There is no second reaction with him, almost zero. He can do some stuff on formulated bootlegs, like design bootlegs, where it's all mechanically in sync, but there is really nothing that he can do, based off athleticism alone. So it's going to rely on the offense to be effective. And it also is going to depend on whether he plays or not, because we still don't know what his status is for the Seahawks or the Dolphins. If he doesn't play, I think there's 0 chance that the Jets make the playoffs. I think that's it. They have to win both games regardless, but I think that there's actually a reasonable possibility for them to win the Seahawks game and possibly the Dolphins game too, if he's in. If he's not, then it's over. So if he's not healthy enough to play this week against the Seahawks, you call it a season for the Jets. If he's in, I think there's a sneaky chance that they actually win, or make it, I should say. So I don't know you guys have watched it too. I've watched plenty of Mike White at this point. I know what he is. I know what he can do. And even though the offensive line is banged up, I still think they're a good enough team to win with a quarterback like him. When you get to the playoffs, maybe a different story. But the defense is great. He gives the entire team a spark. So it's the most heads or tails team that we can talk about here. I think they're a completely different team with him in versus anybody else that they could possibly put in at quarterback. I know you weren't super high on their chances even with Mike White, Kyron, but what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's just because the defense is obviously where it needs to be. I mean, they haven't been as dominant as I thought they have been the last month of the season, but obviously, man, you have to play complementary football. You can't lean on one side of the ball to be that dominant for an entire season or an entire playoff run in the NFL. It's just not realistic. So, as good as their defense has been, I just don't. Even with Mike White, it's like he had a good game against the Vikings, but if he played, it's hard to hold him accountable for that because it is who he is. He is a backup. He's a career backup, and he's been one for a reason. So while I think that he has some turnover issues, and if he doesn't turn over the ball in that game, they have a better chance to win. He's also easily the best option on that team right now. So what is the realistic expectation with him in? If it is to be competitive in games and to give your team a chance to win, to be at least more productive on offense, absolutely, I feel really good about that. But actually winning these ball games, I don't know if Mike White is good enough. I don't know if the offensive line right now is good enough. But they, like you said, they haven't played bad, especially for as banged up as they are. I just think the injuries decimated this team. Lack of consistency at quarterback has decimated this team. And I don't think that they're ready yet. But, I mean, like you know better than me, but they're pretty young on defense. And then the older guys, they have enough coming back where they'll be really, really good next year. They might lose a guy or two, but I think next year should be the focus for the Jets. And it's hard to say that, right? 2 games out of the playoffs. If you win these games, you're in the playoffs. But I just don't. We're talking about my belief level, my faith in them. I don't necessarily have a ton of faith in that offense at all. It's just that's where I'm standing with them right now. I think they'll be really, really, really good next year. Even if you just make a small upgrade, even if you make a small upgrade, Derek Carr is a small upgrade in my opinion as far as the totality of the team, but he's a huge upgrade at quarterback. I think he gives you another 2 wins this season, where you're not sitting here fighting for a playoff spot. So that's kind of where I am with that team.
I think they have a much better chance, obviously, with Mike White, but oh man, it's tough because this is one of these organizations that just can be snake bitten because it's just you riding high all year and now things are going poorly for you, and it's just they're going to start feeling the pressure, and you're going across the country to an extremely hostile environment in Seattle against another desperate football team who, quite frankly, at this point in their time as a franchise, expects to be in the postseason every year. Just that's the type of organization they are. Not that they've been playing great football, but it's just, this is a team that it's not a walkover. I don't think the Jets are a clear favorite in that game. It's a tough trip for them, and even if they win, you still got to go play another team that even with Mike White, I think is a better football team than the Jets on the road again. So, are they at home against the Dolphins if they play that final game?
They are. The Jets are on the road for the next 2 games.
Okay, so yeah, there's 2 road games. It's a tough situation. If Mike White pulls it off, it'll be because they hit the high end of his play, and that's kind of what you need to hope for right now. But I don't know how likely that is that they're going to get that 2 straight weeks here when they literally it's in my opinion the one way they get in the postseason.
I'll just say this: I think it's more realistic with Mike White in than I think you guys are giving him credit for, because their games with him in versus the Vikings and against the Bills were both very close. They dropped a pass in the end zone on 4th down that would have won them that game, and they still they drove partway down the field to try and win. With the Bills game, that was with him getting knocked out of the game twice and Joe Flacco fumbling while he was in, and then a late game fumble. Like, I think they have a more realistic chance, if like a legitimately realistic chance to make it, if he's in. If he's not, it's it.
Oh yeah,
Not even a
and I
question.
like Mike White. I just want to make that extremely clear. I really like Mike White. It's just I think people expect way too much from him in this situation. Like Mike White is really good, bro. Like for what he is. If you're talking like backups in the league, I mean, he's proven to be as productive as any backup in this league. So I really like Mike White. I wish they were more well rounded, so you didn't have to lean on them so much. Throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game for any
Yeah.
quarterback, in my opinion, is just not the way to go. But I like Mike White. He's a hell of a backup.
I think yeah. I think that they would have a better record now, even if with Zach Wilson, if they still had Brees Hall and AVT. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those guys made a massive difference. But
yeah.
Last team to really talk about here is the Titans. The Steelers, the Raiders, they both have, at best a 2% chance to make it. I mean, I think at this point, to be perfectly honest about it, it's probably not a conversation worth having. The Titans, they have a 41% chance to have the number 4 seed because they do have the chance with the Jaguars in the AFC South. But if they don't get that, they have essentially no opportunity to win a wild card spot. So really, it's all down to Week 18 for them. I mean, that's definitely a must-watch game. And if the Titans look halfway decent against the Cowboys, then I think, maybe that should be a primetime game versus the Jaguars. If the Titans look like they can't do anything versus the Cowboys, maybe not. It just depends on what other good games are, the way that it falls for the last couple. But I mean, any thoughts on the Titans? I know, Kyron, you kind of got to get out of here. So do you want to just close out with the AFC, or do you want to try and hit the NFC as well?
I think I got till about like 11:45, so I think we can get some good headway done here. But my thoughts on the Titans is that if Derrick Henry is running for 150 yards a game, you have a chance. I mean, it's just really simple. You have to lean on Derrick Henry. They'll go as far as Derrick Henry and that defensive front takes them. I don't think we need to I'm not going to do a deep dive on them. It's very cut and dry. They're very limited at quarterback, even with Ryan Tannehill playing. They're better for sure when Ryan Tannehill is playing. But if Malik Willis is the guy, I almost feel like you should just damn near it's not run option offense, but like you have to have some kind of you just be so run dependent that you shorten games. You get first downs and you try your best to be creative in the red zone. That's the path for them to get in. And I think that we can never count out Vrabel. We can never count out Derrick Henry. But because they've been there before, as much as we give them, a little bit of flack, the Titans have been here for like 3 or 4 years straight now. They've been in these playoff situations. They've made deep runs in the playoffs. They've been here. They know what it takes to get it done. If anybody can find a way to get it done, I think it'll be the Titans. So I'm excited to see them finish out the last couple of games.
Yeah, I think the offense is going to be so limited, and kind of like the opposite reasons that Miami is struggling. Is it's just like they're not going to be able to throw the ball, and I do think there's a massive drop off from Tannehill to Willis right now in terms of passing. I don't love Tannehill, but I think Tannehill, just as a play action passer, has been highly efficient when they've been able to set it up with that run game. And I just look, Willis as a runner is great. He maybe has not been as dynamic initially at the NFL level as I thought he could be. And it's just they're gonna have to come up with some completely different game plan on the whim here to try and figure it out. I just think it's an extremely difficult spot to be in with 2 weeks to go to try and I guess they only have to win one game, really. They only have to beat Jacksonville, but you just lost to Houston, and I know Houston is playing better football, but it's just I'm not fully in on this team when we need to hope Henry can just muscle his way to us scoring 21 points and then relying on our defense to stop an explosive offense when it matters. I don't know. They still have a shot just because it's only one game and anything can happen. But I think that them having to turn to Willis in this situation is unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know how confident I would have been with them regardless. I mean, they're limited. They're just limited. And I think going up against any team in the actual playoffs themselves would have been a tough out for them. So, at this point, Look, I mean, maybe they make it and maybe they make noise. I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. But it's just not I wouldn't expect it. And I think I'm going to trust the quarterback situation in Jacksonville right now. Plus, they're just hot. Like the whole team is just hot right now. They look good. They passed the eye test in a lot of ways for a playoff team. Yeah, they started very slowly, but they look like a playoff team right now. All right, NFC. Try and roll through this pretty quick. Eagles. You probably would have thought they would have locked up the number 1 seed by now, but they didn't because Jalen Hurts got hurt, and they fell to Cowboys this past week. I mean, percentage-wise, it's most likely going to happen, but it's just not official yet. They technically, let me see here. Cowboys have a greater than 0% chance to get the number 1 seed right now, which is pretty wild, but that would take a lot. So I think at this point, we can assume that the Eagles will win that division. They have to play the Saints. They have to play the Giants. So even if Jalen Hurts is not ready for one of those games, I'm still pretty confident with them. They're a much better team than either one. The Giants, they keep hanging around, which, is a fun story, but I think, the Eagles will be a bit of a buzzsaw. They're able to stop the run. They're able to, play very well against the pass. I just, that would be a pretty shocking close to the regular season if the Giants were to end up winning that game. So I think we can pretty much call that a day. The Vikings do not have the tiebreaker over the Eagles. So even if they end up with an equal record, it's not going to happen. So they would need the Eagles to lose out. So I just think at this point, we're confident with them with Jalen Hurts, and we don't know what his injury status will be, but they're probably still going to walk away with the number 1 seed. And I would imagine that he'll be right for the playoffs, especially with an extra week of rest. It might be a long time between playing, but I think that's kind of the last thing you need to think about. I know that you love the Eagles, Kyron, and you love Jalen Hurts, so feel free to wax poetically.
I won't even do it though, but because I think that they've just proven it over the course of the year. I think even this past week, the defense, they had their best game, but they showed you how good they could be even without a guy of Jalen Hurts caliber. I think with Jalen Hurts, they win that game by 14 points. They don't have the turnovers. They're more efficient in the run game. They have the longer, more sustained drives because of Jalen Hurts' ability to run the football as well. I think with that team, with Jalen Hurts, they probably win that game by 14 points. I feel better about the Eagles going forward than I did even before that game, because the defense is going to give up 34 points a game. It's just not been, 40 points a game, excuse me. It's just not been their MO. They haven't done that all season. So I like where they are. I think they get the first round bye. It just depends on, how consistent they can. I think leaning on the running game is going to be key for them. I know Sirianni he's found a good balance, right? Last year was either 2 run heavy or 2 pass heavy. Had a really good balance this year. I think going into the playoffs, we all know how good Jalen Hurts has been this year, but still lean on the run game. If it isn't broke, don't fix it, especially in the NFC playoffs. You're going to have tough trench games, right? Wear those guys down, and in those fourth quarters, be able to finish ball games and not put the ball in harm's way. That's a luxury to have. Not every team has that. So they're one of the few teams I think that can actually do that. And as long as they do that, I feel really good about the Eagles in the NFC.
I think it's ridiculous that they were going to be underdogs to Dallas with Hurts starting at the beginning of the week. It's just silly. Like they're just, and honestly, they lost this week, but uncharacteristic fumble kind of ruins the game for you. And it's a game that they really, regardless of how well Hurts is playing, this is the most complete roster we've seen since the 07 Patriots. And I have no problem saying that. This is just an absolutely unique masterpiece of a roster building design. It's just the worst unit is their pass rush. Really, it's their worst unit, and it's probably a top 5 pass rush in the NFL. And you look at it, they're best corner duo. Top 2 outside receiver duo. Top 5 tight end. Bunch of running backs, quarterback that adds to the running game, and then number 1 offensive line. there's just no weakness on this roster. And as far as I'm concerned, because of that, if you're going to beat this team, it has to be because the quarterback doesn't play his best game. Because in my opinion, I think that's the only thing that really could stop them at this point. They're just what they were missing against Dallas was a quarterback who can move around the pocket when the team is getting good pass rush and deliver a throw still, which Hurts is very good at. Minshew isn't bad at, but is not as good at. And they still scored 34 points on a good defense who was getting pass rush production. So it's almost unfair, just like the amount of riches this team has right now. And yeah, they should, even if Minshew plays, I think they should stomp the Saints this week, and then they'll just kind of get a couple weeks off here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they'll be in a comfortable position, and I think that's realistic for them. They are more than likely gonna roll through about any team besides the 49ers through the playoffs too. I think even the Cowboys, if they have Jalen Hurts in, I'm pretty confident about that game. 49ers defense is so good that's really the one thing that gives me pause. I think, the Cowboys on a great day, yeah, but I'm pretty confident. So the Vikings are another one. They've locked up the division. They've locked up no, they haven't locked up the number 2 seed. They most likely have it because they have to play the Bears in week 18. Packers next week. Packers have a chance to make the playoffs. 49ers. So the difference in percentage must mean that they have a better conference record. Must be. So, I mean, what you can take a look or comment on the Vikings real quick while I take a look at their conference standing, because otherwise it should probably be a little bit closer. This implies
the Niners have the tiebreaker if they end up tied.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Vikings are. It's funny because I just I have zero faith in this team in the playoffs. It's like they're an incredible regular season story. The offense is playing at an extremely high level. The pass rush when it's on is really good and can really disrupt games. But I don't think they have a very good defense at all. They have some issues in the back end that I'm concerned about. The run defense isn't great. The pass rush is off and on, like I said, but they have the guys that when the pass rush is on, when you're able to have some guys on the edge like that, I think that they can be good enough in the playoffs to be respectable and disrupt games, because all you need to do is get after the quarterback. You can be a terrible run defense, and it doesn't matter. You're still going to have to throw the ball to win at some point in the playoff. So if they can disrupt the passer rush with the pass rush, I like them. I just don't believe in them to beat any team. Who would be the first round matchup today at this point?
Washington.
I wouldn't trust them to beat Washington right now. I just wouldn't. The Commanders are so good defensively; they can run the football as long as the quarterback's taking care of the ball. Which, I mean, listen, I don't want to jump out the window yet. The Big Wentz looked pretty good yesterday, man. He looked good in that fourth quarter. So if they have Wentz playing as well as he looked like he was playing the other night, I wouldn't trust them to beat them. It's funny. They're sitting there 12-3. They're finding the most miraculous ways to win football games. I just don't think it's very sustainable. The way they've won, I said that like week 6, and here we are, and they're 12-3. So who knows? They could be a team of destiny. I just don't believe in them that much.
Well, it's going to look like when they lose a game, like what they did with the Lions. Like there's going to be a game where everything doesn't go right. Like they just, every game it's, we hold teams to field goals in the red zone, get the turnovers we need when we need them, convert 4th downs when we need to, kick the 60-yard field goal when we need to, like get the jump ball to Justin Jefferson when we need to, which is obviously like one of the
Bill's
higher.
Fumble on the 1-yard line.
Yeah, like it's just, it's these games are like, one of these things goes wrong and we lose like every week. And it's just at some point, not only does one of these things go wrong, like 6 of them does, and you lose by 2 touchdowns to a team you thought you were going to beat. I'm not lying. Like, even though I'm not certain how much I really think Washington deserves to make the playoffs right now, like if they do, like I really want to play the Vikings right now, not the 49ers. Like, I don't think it's close in terms of that. They're treading the line every week, and they've been great in these key situations at making the play when it matters. But and you can do that for 11 weeks straight, I guess. We've seen this, but at some point the luck's gonna. I don't think this is like a serious contender in this conference. I think they're probably like the fourth best team at best because of what we just saw Dallas do this past week, and really the Niners have been playing great football as well. They're I think that they're more worried about holding on to the 2 seed right now than they are getting the 1 seed. Absolutely.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you look at this, and I'm not sure where the percentages come from. I mean, from a pure mathematics standpoint, I guess it makes sense. But who do you trust more to win out? The Vikings against the Packers and Bears, or the 49ers against the Raiders and Cardinals?
The Niners, pretty
The
easy.
Niners.
Right, exactly.
Because,
Vikings on the road both games too.
yeah, the 49ers is playing so good. It doesn't even matter. Brock Purdy's playing good football. He's taking care of the ball. He's not doing anything too great. He's not doing anything to hurt them. But their defense is so good, man. It's just I don't understand. Like they don't even have they just popped up out of nowhere. Essentially, like they've always been a solid defense. They've always had the pieces. But I think Hufunga's really unlocked the different. He's a little bit overzealous sometimes. He gets beat on some double move stuff. He gets a little confused. He's too aggressive sometimes. But I think he's kind of unlocked them as far as playmaking ability and their ability to be more creative. And they don't even have to do a ton of blitz packages. It's just I really do just love the 49ers so much. I think they should be the favorite in the NFC actually going forward. But I really like them, and hopefully we get an NFC Championship 49ers Eagles. I think that would be the best football that could be played.
I think that's the trajectory that we're on. I think, the Packers, they still have a breath of life left in them. So the Vikings are going to Lambeau this coming week. If the Packers win that game, I mean, the Vikings probably they almost certainly drop out of second place because I don't see the Niners dropping a game to the Raiders. The Packers put themselves in prime position to have a win at home against the Lions to sneak into the playoffs. So, I mean, the Commanders still control their own destiny technically because of that tie, but I mean, that's a storyline to watch for sure as the season rounds out. And I'm more confident in the 49ers. So even though they're in third, my final estimate is probably them in second place, which means that they can't play the Eagles until the conference championship game, which definitely would be a fun watch. 49ers, obviously, they've locked up the division quite a while ago. Pretty underwhelming NFC West. So I'm not sure. I think we've kind of already touched on them in this Vikings-Niners number 2 seed conversation. So I think we can roll over that. The Eagles, I just don't see them losing out. So I think the conversation about the Niners getting the 1 seed is probably pretty much done at this point. That takes us to the wonderful conversation surrounding the NFC South. Buccaneers are at 7-8. They are more than likely going to get that number 4 seed. I guess the Panthers, they have the tiebreaker over them from earlier this year. So if they do win head-to-head this week, they could still not win the division because they could lose the final week against the Saints and drop it. But it does put them in a pretty good position. The Saints, I don't know what the path for them making the playoffs is. Think a lot of things would have to happen. I guess they would have to win out, and the Bucks and Panthers would both have to
lose week 18.
The Bucks would have to lose out, and the Panthers would have to lose at least 1 game.
Which means the Panthers would have to beat the Bucks, then lose to New Orleans.
Yeah.
It has to be perfect results. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we can pretty much count that out, especially because we know that that the Saints are about to go up against the Eagles this week, and none of us are happy or confident about that matchup. So, this is really a 2-team race at this point. So, I mean, one team has Sam Darnold and will probably never, for the remainder of their franchise, run for 340 yards again in a game. And the other one has Tom Brady and hasn't looked good, but keeps winning in the fourth quarter, or overtime. So, I mean, you tell me if you feel differently about that.
Hey, man, top 10 defense, You got Tom Brady. You should feel pretty good if you're a Buccaneers fan. It's the ugliest way to play and win football games, but I mean, you can't ignore it. Like they keep playing good enough on defense. They're really good score-wise, and I don't think that they've been like extremely sharp defensively either. They've given up a lot of yards. They've given up they've had team sustained drives against them. They're just really, really good in the red zone. They don't let you score touchdowns. So I mean, but they've done that all season. They've been a top 10 scoring defense, top 10 total defense all football season. I think they'll continue to be because they're that talented. They have that many vets on the team that they bend, they don't break on defense, and that's a great ability to have. And Tom Brady's good enough to win football games. I mean, word on the street is Ryan Jensen will be back for the playoffs if they get in, so that would be good. So you don't know how big of a difference that will make, but they've been able to run the ball a little bit better the last few weeks if they continue to lean on that. And then I trust Tom Brady to not make those. Like he had a couple just inadvertent silly throws yesterday that just weren't characteristic. Other than that, he was really, really sharp. He missed that. I know he missed the little slant there on third down in the fourth quarter. It was kind of uncharacteristic, but Tom Brady's playing like Tom Brady for the most part. I think that they're just really, really, really limited offensively. They don't have any speed there. They have to play. They just have to play so ugly. This is what they have to do. I know people giving Byron and all those guys a lot of flack, but the personnel doesn't allow for you to be that creative. The offensive line isn't very good. They have talents at running backs, but they aren't necessarily just grinded out, handed off 20 times and pounded into the defense type of team. And they're old at receiver. Those guys are still really good, but they've all had bad injuries. None of them are burners. They're still sure-handed and do a really good job. But it's just funny. Like you put them in a playoff situation, they'd be matched up with the Cowboys first round, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
Yep.
I would trust them to beat the Cowboys. Like I think they beat the Cowboys in a playoff game. Like I trust Tom Brady to get that done, and then whoever they play the next week, it'll probably be it could be an Eagles team, I believe. If the Eagles, so
it just depends.
You telling me they couldn't beat the Eagles if the Eagles are the one seed? Like it's funny we keep talking about it. Same thing. I guess we'll talk about it later. But Aaron Rodgers, that team's looking pretty damn good the last couple of weeks. Like you telling me teams aren't scared to go play Aaron Rodgers right now? Like it's funny that how much we talk about it. I thought that's what we would get at the end of the year. I just didn't think they looked this bad all year and getting to this point. But I think both teams are pretty much trending in the right direction.
It's like the same formula for them every week, which is the thing that concerns me. This team is they're just so talented and just they don't look it at all right now. Like they're finding ways to win on the margins, like a bad team should be. But Tom Brady's getting it done, and that should terrify if they do this to Dallas in Wild Card Weekend and they just have this comeback win and they clutch it out and Brady looks like playoff Brady, and then they're going to Philly next week and you're the Eagles and. Yeah, you're the Eagles. You should feel good against anybody, but
come on, man.
You're like
Look,
13
guys,
with 6 minutes left, and Brady's got
Ryan
the ball.
Jensen coming back, that matters because I think that's been the biggest challenge for them is that Brady gets the ball out, so he doesn't necessarily take like a crazy number of sacks, but like the urgency for him to throw has probably been the biggest impact on that entire team right now, and Jensen also helps in the run game. So
they have to get the ball out because they can't block.
Exactly.
That's why they have to get, and then even when they are blocking well enough for him to get the ball out, his clock is so sped up, his footwork's off. Sometimes he's not able to step in the throws. That 100% makes a big difference.
He doesn't trust him right now.
The way
Jensen makes a difference.
The way that they have played offense these past 2 weeks has kind of like made up for their run game, in that like Brady has just committed to the two-step throw, like we're gonna get 4 yards.
The Chargers.
We get 3 yards. We're the Chargers, and then the Cardinals are like, we're gonna play 6-man across underneath, and you're gonna have to throw deep. And Brady's finally like, all right, cool, we're gonna win now. Like we're just gonna throw it deep. Like that is unreal that he manufactured that from the Cardinals defense. It's just crazy. And I don't know where this team could get to. I think they should win this division. I'd be shocked if they laid. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they laid an egg because I've seen them do it. Against Carolina, but this formula of just like hang around and then see if Brady can do something has worked for them, which it worked for New England for a long time too. So
they ran stick like 5 times in a row on that last drive to kick the field goal to tie it up. They ran stick like 5 times in a row. I was like, are they going to keep doing this? It's just like, it's funny. And then the no huddle Bucks are the best offense in the NFL. It's like, why don't you just do it the whole game? Speed up the tempo. Like, it's not sustainable in NFL. I mean, this isn't the ACC where you can just go, or the Pac-12 you can go no huddle.
They should find other teams. Right. A lot of teams are like this. Like, you can find periods where it's like the right thing to do, and they kind of wait till the end of the game. Yeah.
The Packers did it a lot yesterday. They went tempo and a couple snaps. They just had the Dolphins weren't even lined up yet, and they're getting the ball out. They're getting quick stuff on the edges, and it's worked. Their receivers block fairly well. So even if you have to just get back to screen game, and they do it a lot anyway. But like you said, you have to find ways to exploit that because you've been really, really good at it.
I think it's just about tiring out their own guys because, I mean, you got Mike Evans in there plus 30. You got Julio Jones in there plus 30. I mean, like, they're NFL athletes, but you just like run those guys no huddle and you're trying to make them block all the time, or like you gotta get to the fourth quarter with these guys too. So I mean that's the one thing I'll say about
that they're a poorly coached football team.
I think that's really
it's okay to say that.
Yeah, I think it's fair too. All right, we're getting there. All right, Cowboys, they're pretty much locked into the number 2 seed. I think on their best day they could beat almost anybody in the NFC. On their worst day, they could lose to non-playoff teams very comfortably. They're talented, but they're streaky. And I don't think they're the best coached team either. Setting aside certain places, they're a bit star heavy. I think, for example, if either CeeDee Lamb or Micah Parsons was not in for a playoff game, like I just don't really believe in them that much, unless they're playing, I don't know, I guess like the Commanders or the Giants, maybe they could still pull it out. But like, I think those two players mean too much. And I'm not going to talk about the quarterback because that's pretty much true for any team once you get to the playoffs. But I think they're star heavy. They're star reliant. I know that they run the ball well, but I think a good playoff team can defend that if you don't have the other threat. I think Micah Parsons does too much with the pass rush. So I think they're locked into, I said the number 2, I really mean the number 5. They're locked into the number 2 spot in the NFC East. They're locked into the number 5 spot for playoff seeding. And we just got to see if the Cowboys are going to cowboy when they get to the playoffs or if they've actually got some juice to them. I mean, if somehow the Panthers end up winning the NFC South, then yeah, I think that they could probably steamroll them and get to the second round pretty comfortably. But I don't know. What do you think, Kyron? I know you're not the biggest Cowboys fan, but
I actually really love the makeup of the team. Like, I think the offensive line has been like a top 5 to 7 unit this year, which is surprising because they had some injuries, had to move some guys around. They've had to do a lot of shuffling on the board for them up front, but I like the defense. The pass rush is obviously incredible. I think Trayvon Diggs, he had a little bit of a rough game this past week. He just gets too overzealous sometimes. He commits too much, but he's had a really, really good all-pro level year. He's been much better than he was last year. I really like the team. It's simple as they'll go as far as Dak Prescott's taking. If he's taking care of the ball, if he's playing well, like you saw him play against the Eagles, they'll have a chance to beat anybody. They're going to be able to run the football. Zeke's been really good. Zeke and Tony Pollard both have an opportunity to go over 1,000 yards this season. The last couple of these last 2 games, they're a really good football team. My personal dislike for Dak doesn't cloud that. Like, I'm not a fan of Dak, but if he plays to the peak of his ability, that team could win the Super Bowl, and that's not even hyperbole. They could really be good enough to beat anybody. I just don't trust that to happen. I think they'll go as far as he takes them, and if history tells us anything, they maybe win a playoff game or they lose their first round game, but I don't trust them if they have to rely on Dak throwing the ball 40, 45 times a game to beat anybody in the NFC. I just think it's too tough, but they're a really solid football team. They should be taken seriously. They'll just go as far as he takes them.
Yeah, I mean, this is like their run blocking has been much better this year than I would have expected it to be, but they still have some pass set deficiencies at times, and I do think when they go up against Philly again or against the Niners, like it could show its face, and that'll get to Prescott's not the best QB when he's under pressure throughout a game, so that concerns me a little bit. But yeah, I mean, if you get the high end, they have a shot, obviously, but I don't know. We haven't really seen that for long periods of time from them. And I think when you are kind of the star dependent football team, you again rely on like these big plays that they kind of had this week against Philly. And when you get a playoff game like you did against the Niners last year, where you're just not generating these kind of momentum swinging plays, and you lose these games, and it's just, against a team like Philly where every single player on that roster is a plus, you're just taking jabs like every play, and then when you do actually hit on a deep ball, you might be down 14. So it doesn't actually matter that much. And when you're on the road, like, the momentum is less maximized by something like that. It's just, I don't know. They're a very good football team. I think they're just a little less. They're on a tier below kind of the top two teams in the NFC right now.
Yep, agreed. I think they'll be fun to watch. I don't see them the Super Bowl caliber necessarily, but we shall see. All right. Giants and Commanders, kind of lump them together. Giants are at 8-6. They hold the number 6 seed. A win over the Colts this coming week would lock them into the number 6 seed. I believe. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. That would lock them into the number 6 seed. The Commanders are at 7-7 and 1. Well, the Giants are at 8-6 and 1. Excuse me. And the Commanders are at 7-7 and 1. They control their own destiny, but controlling their own destiny would require them to beat both the Browns and the Cowboys. Browns, I think, is realistic. Cowboys, I don't want to say is unrealistic, but I would say unlikely. And then it's just going to depend on whether the Seahawks, Lions, or Packers can win out. If one of those teams can win out, then, well, actually, let me step back for a hot second there. If they, it really depends on winning out because they have that. So Nick, you can probably speak to this better than me, but they don't actually have to win out. They have to win at least one game, and then no other team can win out between the Seahawks, Lions, and Packers, right? They need at least one loss from each of them and one win. So if they beat the Browns, Seahawks fell to the Jets, and the Lions fell to the Packers, and the Packers fell to the Vikings, like, say, for example, that would put them in. Yeah. So, a lot of necessities, but at the same time, Seahawks, Lions, and Packers, none of them have been so good that we can just assume they're going to win out at this point, right?
Yeah, I don't think they'll win out.
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, just disgusting final seed. If
the Packers roll,
really
that makes it a little bit more
fun against the Giants.
Yeah.
I think the Packers are ultimately going to be the team that gets in. I think they're going to win out and get in, and I think Washington's probably going to beat Cleveland, and then they're going to get Dallas, and Dallas won't have anything to play for. But I tell you personally, like, Jerry Jones is not going to send out his backups when he has a chance to knock Washington out of the playoffs. So I think they send their starters and kick Washington's ass and send them back to the doldrums of what the heck are we going to do this offseason. The Giants game was their lifeline. And I think they're a better team than the Giants. I think they just laid an absolute egg in that game. The Giants said, hey, we're going to show up. We're going to do the Brady strategy. We're going to throw the ball short, except for we're never even going to try and push the ball downfield. Del Rio just shows up and says, no big plays. We give up one big play in the first game. That's the only reason we tied. We would have won if we didn't. They didn't give up any big plays. The Giants had one good drive, converted their 4th and 9, got a defensive touchdown and win that game. And, you're in the playoffs because of it. Washington just, you rode this kind of fine line with your quarterback play where you're like, all right, we are converting third downs and haven't had a ton of turnovers, and now you're starting to see the turnovers, and that's why you are where you are. And look, the defense hasn't really played. Yeah, I see. Yeah, Nathaniel Hackett got fired, so that's fun.
2 months too late.
Two pieces of breaking news.
That's finally happened. Yeah.
Mike White's been cleared to play.
Okay.
So he is good to go versus the Seahawks, and Nathaniel Hackett has been fired in less than a season, which has any coach ever been fired in less than a season?
I'm sure it's been done before. I definitely
don't know, man. I don't know. Oh, Urban Meyer. That's right.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been a few, but none that I remember off my head other than Urban. But that's long overdue.
Crazy that we've had 2 years in a row where that's happened. Like these teams are just apparently terrible at hiring coaches.
The Commanders are a good team, though. You're way too critical, man. For the roster that they have right now,
the roster's good. Their pass sets suck right now, and they're finishing off the year with the Giants have an underrated pass rush. Who has? Leno's been tough. Really, and I think he's the guy that benefits from a better interior, and they just haven't had the interior this year. They finished the year off with Bosa, Garrett, Parsons, so that's a great way to finish off for a team that's their weakness is going to be that. So I think that they're like slight favorites against Cleveland this week. And then they have to figure something out. I think Wentz could be a spark. I'm worried though, because I think if they actually make the playoffs and Wentz plays well, they're going to convince themselves that Wentz should come back next year. And I don't want that either. So I don't know, man.
Look, if they make the playoffs and get smoked with Wentz in there, I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Yeah, I guess.
So,
it's same for the Giants as well. It's they're two good defenses. I think they're two really well coached football teams. I think Rivera and company have done a pretty good job this year. I mean, they don't have superior personnel. They have a solid roster. Their defensive front is really, really good. Getting Chase Young back will definitely help as he continues to progress. But I think for where they are at this point in the season, you have to be ecstatic. I think they've outperformed the personnel at this point.
Well, this is kind of where I think a lot of people in Washington thought they'd be is kind of on the edge of wild card here at the end of the year. And defensively, I think the roster is more complete than people give it credit. Cam Curl didn't play this week, and all of the issues that I talked about a couple weeks ago that were occurring the first 2 weeks, like coverage busts on the back end, came back immediately with Cam Curl not playing. I think they can't play well without him. He's the key to the defense is Cam Curl. So that's a big one. They need him back. They need to pay him this offseason. And I'm worried if they don't make the playoffs. So there's a lot of people. This is a fan base that is just vicious. They haven't had a winning team in a long time, and they expect a winning team every year. So Ron Rivera's 2 years in a row with 7 wins, and now another year where they might win 8 and not make the playoffs. People are questioning whether they've actually progressed, and I think the roster has. But if you just look at results, which a lot of people do, it's not perfect right now.
So let me throw this out there real quick. We're all kind of assuming, casually, I think that the Giants will beat the Colts and lock that up. But they have to play the Eagles in Week 18. Yeah. I mean, if they drop one to the Colts, which I don't think would be that crazy, and then they drop one to the Eagles, the Giants might not get in either. So we might be looking at a situation where, both the Commanders and even if they drop one to the Colts.
This is a wild final 2 spots because all these teams
I want to see the Packers and the Lions in the playoffs. Those would be the fun matchups to watch. But
I don't think it's possible to see both because
they play each other.
They play each other.
Yeah.
And
I'd even rather see Seattle though. At least they can kind of score.
And because the Commanders and the Giants both have the tie, you got to beat them. You can't go in with a tied win record. You got to have an outright lead over them with the win record. Yeah. So I think it's literally impossible to see both the Lions and the Packers in. And I think it's pretty unlikely we see the Seahawks in, to be honest, because even though they play the Rams, I honestly think the Jets are a better team than the Seahawks with Mike White in. Now that we know that, I'm pretty confident in that. I know it's in Seattle, but the Seahawks have not been as good. I don't think the Seahawks have not fared well against the best defenses that they've played. You know what I mean? Their running game isn't the same as what it was earlier in the year. I think Geno's still playing well, but I think the Seahawks are kind of done for at this point. And I think the Lions or the Packers are probably going to finish strong. It's really going to depend. I'm curious to see which one it is, but
yeah, I mean the Giants. I agree they could lose to the Colts. I think that they are probably a worse team than the Eagles backups playing against them. So I think they could lose that game too. I think just they're a well coached team and they show up for games. They don't lay eggs. I have a hard time seeing them flopping against Indy this week at home when they have a shot to clinch a spot. I think they're going to find a way to get that done. It might not be pretty, but I think they'll get it done. And I really think Green Bay is the team right now. I just think they're playing their best football at the end. I think Rodgers is, obviously having that on your roster is going to give you a boost. And I think they have had to win games late season at home against Minnesota before, and I don't think they fear the Vikings. So that's the big one for them, because I think if they beat the Vikings, they're going to feel good about a home game against Detroit in Week 18. Yeah,
I tend to agree with you. Anything else that we want to comment on? You have faith in the Seahawks to close this out? I mean,
it's going to. I think Giants and Packers. That's the Seattle. I think the Jets game's tough, but even if they win out, like they don't have great tiebreakers. Like they would be behind Green Bay. They would have a tiebreaker over Detroit if it were just Detroit. They need the Lions to beat Green Bay. They need to win out. They need the Commanders to lose. Like I think that's the hardest path, quite frankly, of any of these teams.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is that, and this is just wrapping up my thoughts, the Giants, the Commanders, the Lions, the Seahawks, everybody but the Packers should feel really, really good about where their franchises are at this point, though. Like going forward next year, no matter how these last couple of weeks play out, I think those four teams have overperformed. They've outperformed the expectation. And I think that they should all feel really good about where they are going into the draft, going into free agency, building towards next season. I think those teams are a little bit ahead of schedule for where we thought they would be at this point. So those teams should all have a very optimistic outlook.
Jahan Dotson is a stud, and we learned that the last 2 weeks. And that's the positive from this last month for Washington.
That might be a top 7, 8 wide receiver duo. They're not top 5 yet, but they're up there. They're really good.
They're decent.
They've got playmakers and they've got pass rushers, and I think they need to work on the offensive line, and they've got to find a quarterback.
Chase
and I think that's
this week.
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
I think that's actually pretty similar situation to the Jets. They've got playmakers and pass rushers. They need to work on the offensive line a little bit, and they need to find a quarterback.
Yeah.
And Giants, they have
their
defense and pass rushers. Yeah, they've got playmakers kind of, but
beat up.
That's the product of generational coaching. What Wink and Dable have done this year is like no funny. It's probably the best thing, the most impressive thing I've ever seen from a coach staff in the NFL. In my lifetime, it's absolutely insane. The injuries,
they're so well put together from a coaching perspective too. Because I love Dable. I love that they brought over Kafka. I like that they got that combination. And then bringing in a guy like Wink Martindale to run that defense gave them such a personality and an edge on that side of the ball too. I really love what they put together there.
And Saquon's ability to stay healthy this year has been the key for that team. Without him offensively, they wouldn't have a ton. But it's been very good to see that. So I'm really excited for the future of that team, because I think that they're going to be a team that when they get healthy, they have some talent at receiver. They're just not very healthy. And then you can add through free agency, through the draft. I think that they could be really, really, really good going into next year. I'm really excited about the prospect of the Giants next year, but we don't have to get too much into that. Like I said, I
could talk about that on Thursday's show or something.
Murderers Row division.
Yeah. Talk about the future teams. All right. Yeah. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. Kyron, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you so we can let you be on your way and spend time with your family?
Right here at Kyron Samuels. Follow me on Twitter, then you'll get everything else. Got some big playback streams coming up for these bowl games, and got some more stuff coming out very soon. We'll get into draft evals and Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl stuff. We'll get into that really soon. So follow me there. That's where you can find me.
Beautiful. And Nick, how about you, man?
Yeah, at Nick with Sports on Twitter. I'm just keeping up with draft stuff's getting more and more, but we're keeping up with NFL coverage for now. A lot of that, and obviously the college bowl games. Excited for those to start really picking up too. So you can find me there, and I'll be doing stuff.
Right on. You can find me on Twitter at TheMaxDean. You can find our producer Noah Ashley at No Ashtray Sports. And we will be back on Thursday to talk about something. This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.